I bought the lake house because it was cheap. That's the honest reason. People always want a deeper explanation when something terrible happens. They want grief, mystery, fate, family history, some old connection to the land. They want the kind of reason that sounds like a warning in hindsight. The truth is simpler. I was 32, newly divorced, working remotely, and tired of paying city rent for a life I hated. When I found a 2-bedroom lake house in northern Wisconsin, listed for less than half what it should have cost, I didn't ask the questions I should have asked. I asked about internet. I asked about heating. I asked about the roof. I asked whether the road was plowed in winter. I did not ask why the listing had been active for 11 months. I did not ask why every interior photo was taken during the day. I did not ask why none of the photos showed the lake after sunset. The house sat on a narrow finger of land along a private lake called Wrenwater. That was the official name anyway. The locals called it Wren Lake, or sometimes just the water, which I thought was charming at first. It was about 40 minutes from the nearest proper town, 20 minutes from a gas station, and 5 miles down a road that went from paved to gravel to dirt to something that seemed more like a suggestion between trees. When I first saw it in person, I understood why people romanticize isolation. The house was beautiful in a lonely, weathered kind of way. 2 stories, dark cedar siding, green metal roof, stone chimney, screened porch facing the lake, and a wooden dock stretching out into water so still it looked like polished slate. Tall pines crowded the property on both sides. The opposite shore was thick with forest. No neighboring houses were visible unless you stood at the end of the dock and looked hard through the trees. The late afternoon sky was silver. The lake reflected it perfectly. Not rippled, not broken. Perfectly. That should have bothered me. The realtor was waiting in the driveway when I arrived with the moving truck. Her name was Marianne Voss, and she looked exactly like the kind of person who could sell you something haunted without lowering her commission. Late 50s, short blonde gray hair, camel coat, leather gloves, calm smile, and eyes that didn't linger on the lake for more than a second. She held a folder against her chest and watched while I climbed out of the cab. "Mr. Hale," she said, "Daniel is fine." She nodded once, but never used it. "Long drive?" "Long enough." "The movers are behind you?" "About 20 minutes." "Good. We'll do the final walkthrough quickly." I laughed a little. "Trying to get out before dark?" Her smile did not change. "Yes." I thought she was joking. I was wrong. Inside, the house smelled like cedar, dust, old stone, and cold water. Not mildew, not rot. Water. The kind of smell you get when you open a cooler after the ice has melted. The interior was better than I expected. The previous owner had left some furniture, a plaid couch, a heavy dining table, bookshelves, a cast iron wood stove, 2 bed frames upstairs, and a writing desk placed in front of a wide window overlooking the lake. The realtor moved through the house efficiently. Kitchen, pantry, mudroom, downstairs half bath, living room, porch, upstairs bedrooms, basement. She pointed out the breaker panel, the shutoff valves, the propane tank gauge, the wood pile, the septic access, the well pump, and the router box. All practical, all normal, almost. There were little things. The lake-facing curtains were heavier than the others, thick dark fabric lined with something metallic. The downstairs windows all had extra latches. The basement door locked from the upstairs side. Every exterior door had a deadbolt, a chain lock, and an old iron slide bolt mounted waist high. The screened porch had no screens on the lakeside. They had been replaced with glass, thick glass. I asked about that. Storm protection, Marianne said. From lake storms? Among other things. She moved on before I could ask what that meant. The basement was the strangest part. It was unfinished, low-ceilinged, and cold, with stone walls and a concrete floor. A workbench sat against one wall. An old freezer hummed in the corner, unplugged but somehow still making sound. There were shelves full of paint cans, rusted tools, fishing gear, jars of screws, and folded tarps. At the far end was a narrow wooden door. It looked older than the house. It had no handle, only a keyhole. "What's in there?" I asked. Marianne didn't look at it. "Old storage." "Do I get a key?" "No." That was all. No explanation, no apology, just no. I should have pushed harder. Instead, I followed her upstairs like an idiot. The movers arrived just before 5. They unloaded my boxes, bed, desk, kitchen things, and the few pieces of furniture I had kept after the divorce. Marianne stayed by the front door the whole time, checking her watch every few minutes. The sun was already dipping behind the pines when the movers finished. They left fast, too fast. One of them, a younger guy with a shaved head, paused by the moving truck and looked toward the lake. "What's that?" he asked. I turned. "What?" He squinted. "Looks like someone standing on your dock." There was no one on the dock, just weathered boards stretching into gray water. He stared another second, then shook his head. "Never mind." He got in the truck. They left. The house felt much bigger after that. Marianne stood in the entryway with her folder. "I need to give you the final paperwork." "Already signed everything, didn't I?" "Yes." She opened the folder and removed a smaller envelope. "This is not legal paperwork." I looked at it. My name was written on the front in black ink. Daniel Hale. From the previous owner? In a sense. What does that mean? It means it stays with the house. That was the first time I felt true unease. Not fear. Unease. A small, cold shift under the ribs. Marianne handed me the envelope. "It is important that you read this before full dark." "What is it?" "Rules." I stared at her. "For the property? For living here." I almost laughed. The only reason I didn't was her face. There was no humor there. No sales smile. No professional calm. Just tension. "You're serious," I said. "Yes." I opened the envelope. Inside was a laminated sheet of paper, folded once. Of course it was laminated. If someone ever hands you laminated rules during a real estate closing, walk away. I don't care if you already signed. I don't care if your furniture is inside. I don't care if the mortgage went through. Walk away. At the top of the sheet, in neat black type, were the words, "Wrenwater House, rules for the owner. Do not discard. Do not mock. Do not assume the lake is empty." There were 20 rules. Rule 1. Turn on the lake-facing porch light before sunset. Do not turn it off until sunrise. Rule 2. Close all lake-facing curtains before full dark. If one opens by itself, close it without looking outside. Rule 3. Do not answer knocking from the lakeside of the house. Rule 4. The dock is yours during daylight only. Do not step onto it after dark. Rule 5. If you hear someone swimming at night, do not investigate. Rule 6. There should be no boat tied to the dock. If you see one, close the porch door and lock all 3 locks. Rule 7. If the kitchen faucet runs black water, let it run until it clears. do not touch it. Rule 8. If you hear loons calling after midnight, count the calls. If there are 7, sleep in the upstairs hallway with the lights on. Rule 9. Do not enter the basement between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. Rule 10. If the basement door opens by itself, place salt across the threshold and do not close it. Rule 11. Never open the wooden door in the basement. Rule 12. If someone calls your name from across the lake, answer only, wrong shore. Rule 13. If fog covers the water and the porch light turns blue, leave the house through the front door and sit in your car until the light turns yellow again. Rule 14. Do not invite guests to stay overnight during your first month. Rule 15. If you wake up wet, do not change clothes until you check the dock. Rule 16. If fish are left on the porch, bury them before sunrise. Rule 17. At 2:17 a.m., do not look at the lake. Rule 18. If you see a woman in a white coat standing on the ice, remember that rainwater does not freeze in October. Rule 19. If the old freezer in the basement stops humming, go upstairs immediately. Rule 20. If Marianne comes to the house after dark, ask her what color the sold sign was. If she says anything but red, do not let her in. I read the list once, then again. Then I looked up at Marianne. What is this? Rules. You said that already. You asked twice. I tapped the paper. This is insane. Yes. That answer knocked the next words out of me. She slid a small plastic container across the entry table. Salt. Coarse salt. The kind used for ice or water softeners. Keep some upstairs, she said. Kitchen is best. Why would I need salt? Rule 10. Right, of course. Basement door ghosts hate sodium. Her expression hardened. You can make jokes tomorrow. The room got very quiet. Outside, the lake remained perfectly still. I folded the rules slowly. Who wrote these? The first version was written by the original owner. Most later owners added to it. Some did not stay long enough. I looked toward the living room window. The curtains were still open. The lake reflected the dimming sky. It was beautiful, too beautiful. Why didn't you tell me any of this before I bought the house? Marianne's lips pressed together. Would you have believed me? No. Would you have bought it? No. Then there's your answer. Anger rose in me, hot and welcome. You sold me a house you think is haunted? No, Mr. Hale. I sold you a house that was legally disclosed according to state requirements. That is not the same thing. No, it is not. I stared at her. She did not look away. What happened to the previous owner? I asked. For the first time, Marianne looked toward the lake. Only for a second, then away. He moved out. Alive? Yes. Then why didn't he take the rules? Because he was not the owner anymore. I hated that answer. She checked her watch again. You have 6 minutes before sunset. I looked out. The sky was darker than it had been a minute ago. Like evening had accelerated while we talked. Marianne pointed at the sheet. Rule 1. I should have told her to leave. I should have demanded answers. I should have called my lawyer, or the police, or anyone. Instead, I went to the porch light switch and flipped it. Outside, the lake-facing light came on. Yellow, warm. It reflected across the water in a thin, trembling line. The lake rippled for the first time. Not from wind, from beneath. Marianne exhaled softly. I heard it. That scared me more than the ripple. Rule 2, she said. I closed the lake-facing curtains. Living room, kitchen, porch door, upstairs bedroom, second bedroom. When I came back downstairs, Marianne was at the front door. She had her coat buttoned and gloves on. "You're leaving?" "Yes." "You're really just handing me haunted house instructions and walking out?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because it will be dark in 4 minutes." I almost laughed again. This time, it came out angry. "What if I leave too?" "You can." "Then why say it like that?" She opened the front door. Cold air entered the house. "Because most people don't." Before stepping out, she paused. "Radio and phone reception are poor here. Internet sometimes works, sometimes does not. If something happens tonight, do not call emergency services unless it is a normal emergency." "What's a normal emergency?" "Fire, injury, intruder." "And an abnormal one?" She looked past me, toward the closed curtains. "You'll know." She stepped outside. I followed her to the porch. Her red sold sign still stood near the driveway, leaning slightly in the soft ground. "What color is the sold sign?" I asked. She gave me one small nod. "Red." Then she got in her car and drove away before the sun touched the trees. I watched her taillights disappear down the dirt road. By the time they were gone, full dark had fallen. Not gradually. Fallen. Like a lid. The lake house stood silent behind me. The porch light facing the water glowed yellow. And from the other side of the house, something knocked on the glass. Tap, tap, tap. I froze on the front porch. Lakeside. Rule 3. Do not answer, knocking from the lakeside of the house. The knock came again. Tap, tap, tap. Not loud, not urgent. Polite. I stepped inside and closed the front door. Locked it. Deadbolt, chain, iron slide. Then I stood in the entryway and listened. Tap, tap, tap. The sound came from the living room window. Then the kitchen. Then the porch door. 3 soft taps at each lake-facing opening. As if someone were walking along the outside of the house, politely checking every way in. I did not answer. After a minute, the knocking stopped. I waited another 10 before moving. The house felt different now. During the walkthrough, it had been old and quiet. Now it felt occupied, not by something inside, by attention outside. I made myself unpack one box, then another. Normal tasks, plates and cabinets, clothes in drawers, laptop on desk, toothbrush in bathroom. Anything to pretend I had not bought a house that came with supernatural operating instructions. At 8:03 p.m., the kitchen faucet turned on by itself. I was upstairs unpacking sheets when I heard it. Water running. Full pressure. I went still. Rule 7. If the kitchen faucet runs black water, let it run until it clears. Do not touch it. I walked downstairs. The kitchen sink was running. The water was black, not dirty brown. Black. Thick-looking, glossy, and silent as it poured from the faucet into the drain. It did not splash. It did not foam. It did not smell like sewage. It smelled like lake water. Cold, mineral, deep. I stood in the doorway and watched. Do not touch it. So I didn't. The black stream continued for almost 5 minutes. Then something small came out of the faucet. A fish. Impossible, obviously. It was maybe 3 inches long, pale and eyeless, its body twisting as it dropped into the sink. It flopped once in the black water, then went still. Another followed, then another. I backed away. The faucet coughed. The black water thinned to gray, then clear. The fish remained in the sink. 3 of them, pale, blind, twitching. Rule 16. If fish are left on the porch, bury them before sunrise. They were not on the porch. They were in the sink. I hated that. I hated the gaps most of all. I found a plastic container under the sink, scoop the fish without touching them, and put the lid on. I would bury them in the morning. Probably. Maybe. I didn't know if that was right, but doing something felt better than leaving them in the sink. At 8:46 p.m., the internet went out. At 8:49, it came back. At 8:50, my laptop opened a blank document by itself. A line typed across the screen. "Did you close the curtains?" I shut the laptop. At 9:12, I checked every lake-facing curtain. Living room, closed. Kitchen, closed. Porch, closed. Upstairs bedroom, closed. Second bedroom, open. I stopped in the doorway. The second bedroom faced the lake. I had closed that curtain earlier. I was sure of it. Now it hung wide open. Beyond the glass, the lake was invisible except for the porch light's yellow reflection stretching across the dark water. Rule 2. If one opens by itself, close it without looking outside. I kept my eyes on the curtain rod, not the window, not the lake, not the reflection. I crossed the room with my head tilted slightly down, reached for the curtain, and pulled it shut. Something outside the window breathed on the glass. A circular patch of fog bloomed at face height. Then a finger drew a line through it. Slow, vertical. I stepped backward. The curtain bulged inward, though the window was closed, like something pressed its forehead against the other side. A voice whispered through the glass. "Daniel." My name. Rule 12 said if someone called from across the lake, answer only, "Wrong shore." This was not across the lake. It was at the window, another gap. "Daniel," the voice whispered again. It sounded like my ex-wife. I hadn't heard her voice in months, not in person, not on the phone, just in my head when I couldn't sleep. The voice outside whispered, "I'm cold." I did not answer. The curtain pressed inward farther. "Daniel, please." I backed out of the room and shut the door. The voice behind it changed. Not my ex-wife now, my mother. "Danny?" I locked the bedroom door from the hallway. I didn't know why the old house had locks on bedroom doors from the outside. Now I had a guess. At 10:20, I heard swimming. I was sitting at the kitchen table with every light on, the rule sheet in front of me, and a glass of whiskey I had not touched because the rules had said nothing about alcohol, and I no longer trusted anything that made me slower. Outside from the lake came the sound of someone swimming, not splashing like panic. Swimming, slow strokes, arms entering water, legs kicking, a breath every few seconds. Closer, closer. Rule 5. If you hear someone swimming at night, do not investigate. I stayed in the chair. The swimming continued, then stopped. Right below the porch light, water dripped. Something climbed onto the dock. I heard wet feet on wood. Step, step, step. The porch light buzzed. A shadow crossed the bottom edge of the living room curtain. Human-shaped. Standing on the porch outside the glass, then came the knock. Tap, tap, tap. Do not answer knocking from the lakeside. I did not. The wet shape outside stood there for a long time. Then it said, in Marianne's voice, "The sold sign is blue." I closed my eyes. Rule 20. If Marianne comes to the house after dark, ask her what color the sold sign was. If she says anything but red, do not let her in. I had not asked. It had answered anyway. The thing outside made a soft sound, almost a laugh. Then wet feet walked away, back down the porch steps, back along the dock. A splash. Then silence. At 11:05, I checked the dock through the smallest gap in the porch curtain. I know. Stupid. I had survived a few hours and already thought I could bend the rules. The dock was empty. But there was a boat tied to it, a small rowboat, old wood, white paint peeling. It bumped gently against the dock in water that had been still all evening. Rule 6. There should be no boat tied to the dock. If you see one, close the porch door and lock all 3 locks. The porch door was already closed. I checked the locks anyway. Deadbolt, chain, iron slide bolt, all locked. The boat knocked softly against the dock. Once, twice, 3 times, like wood against wood, like someone knocking politely. I backed away from the curtain. At midnight, the loons started calling. I had heard loons before. Lonely, beautiful, eerie birdsong carrying over northern lakes. This was not beautiful. It was too close, too sharp. The first call rose from the water like a scream. Then a second, then a third. I grabbed the rule sheet. Rule 8. If you hear loons calling after midnight, count the calls. If there are 7, sleep in the upstairs hallway with the lights on. I counted 4, 5, 6. The house settled around me. I waited. 7. Every light in the living room flickered. The loon call echoed across the lake, then cut off suddenly. I got up. My legs felt weak. I gathered blankets, my phone, the rule sheet, a flashlight, and the container with the dead fish because I didn't want to leave them unattended. I went upstairs and sat in the hallway between the 2 bedrooms and the bathroom. Lights on. All of them. Hall light, bathroom light, bedroom lights. I did not sleep. At 12:44, something moved inside the locked second bedroom. A slow drag, like wet fabric across wood. Then a voice from behind the door whispered, "Wrong shore." I gripped the flashlight. The door handle turned once, stopped, then again. The lock held. At 1 a.m., I remembered Rule 9. Do not enter the basement between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. Fine. Easy. I had no intention of entering the basement. At 1:13, the basement door opened. I heard it from the upstairs hallway, a slow creak from below. Then the coldest draft I had ever felt moved up the stairs. Rule 10. If the basement door opens by itself, place salt across the threshold and do not close it. The salt was in the kitchen, downstairs, near the basement door. Of course. I stood in the upstairs hallway, shaking, trying to decide if going downstairs counted as entering the basement. It didn't. Probably. Maybe. The basement door creaked wider below. Something inside the basement began humming. Low, mechanical, the freezer. Rule 19 said if the old freezer in the basement stops humming, go upstairs immediately. It was humming now. Good? Bad? I didn't know. I went downstairs slowly. The kitchen lights were still on. The basement door stood open at the end of the hall. Darkness beyond it. Cold air pouring out. The salt container sat on the counter. I grabbed it, walked to the basement threshold, and poured a thick line across the floor. The humming below stopped. Instantly. Rule 19. If the old freezer in the basement stops humming, go upstairs immediately. I dropped the salt and ran. Behind me, from the basement, something heavy climbed one stair. Wood groaned. I reached the upstairs hallway and slammed myself against the wall. The lights flickered. Another stair creaked, then another. I looked down. A wet hand appeared on the banister below, pale, long-fingered. The hallway lights went out, every single one. In the dark, my phone screen lit up by itself. 2:17 a.m. Rule 17. At 2:17 a.m., do not look at the lake. From downstairs, the living room curtains opened by themselves. I heard every ring slide across the rod, one after another, opening the house to the water. Then, from the lake, my ex-wife's voice called, "Daniel, look at me." And the upstairs hallway window, the one I had not noticed before, filled with blue light reflected from the water. "Daniel, look at me." My ex-wife's voice came from the lake, not from outside the house, not from the porch, from the water itself, soft, clear, close. The upstairs hallway window filled with blue light reflected from below. I hadn't noticed that window during the walkthrough. I hadn't noticed it while unpacking. I hadn't noticed it when I set up blankets in the hall after the 7th loon call. But it was there now, a narrow window at the end of the hallway facing the lake. No curtain. Of course, the house had found one more gap. My phone screen glowed in my hand. 2:17 a.m. Rule 17. At 2:17 a.m., do not look at the lake. Downstairs, the lake-facing curtains had opened by themselves. I heard them sliding across rods. Living room, kitchen, porch. Every lake window exposed. The basement door was still open below. The salt line was across the threshold. The freezer had stopped humming. Something had climbed partway up the stairs, and now my ex-wife was calling from the lake. "Daniel," she said again, "please." I turned away from the hallway window and pressed my forehead against the wall. Do not look at the lake. It sounded easy as a sentence. It was not easy when the whole house was trying to show it to me. Blue light spread across the hallway floor. It moved like water, rippling over the floorboards, sliding under the bedroom doors, climbing the walls. Even with my eyes squeezed shut, I could feel it. Cold brightness. Lake brightness. The thing on the basement stairs took another step. The wood creaked. My ex-wife's voice trembled. "You never listened." That one hit hard, because it was true. Not the lake, not the voice, that sentence. You never listened. People think hauntings work by lying. Sometimes they do, but the worst ones use truth like bait. I stayed facing the wall. "I'm sorry," I whispered. The hallway went silent. I realized my mistake immediately. I had answered, not with the required phrase. Wrong shore. My eyes flew open, but I kept them on the wallpaper. The blue light pulsed. From the lake, my ex-wife laughed. It was not her laugh. Not really. It was close enough to hurt and wrong enough to terrify. The basement thing climbed another stair. A wet hand slapped onto the landing rail below. The salt line had stopped it from crossing the basement threshold, but apparently it hadn't stopped it from reaching out. The rules had never said the salt was a wall, just a line. The phone in my hand buzzed, no service. Still, a text appeared. Unknown. You answered wrong. I threw the phone onto the hallway carpet. It landed screen up. Another message appeared. Unknown. Say it. I didn't. The window at the end of the hall creaked. The glass bowed inward. Lake light poured brighter through it. My ex-wife's voice said, "Wrong shore." She was mocking me now. The thing below took another step. I needed light. The hallway lights were dead, but the bathroom was beside me. I crawled toward it with my eyes low, keeping my face turned from the window. My hand found the bathroom doorway. I reached inside, feeling along the wall until I found the switch. Click. Nothing. Of course. The cold from downstairs spread up the stairwell. The wet hand on the banister slid higher. I needed to get away from the upstairs window, but every safe room had a lake-facing window, or something inside it pretending to be a voice I missed. The second bedroom was locked, with something wet behind the door. My bedroom had a lake-facing window, curtains closed but untrusted. The bathroom had a small frosted window facing the side yard, no lake view. I went in, shut the door, locked it. Then I sat with my back against the tub in darkness, rule sheet clenched in both hands. At 2:18, the blue light vanished from under the bathroom door. 2:17 had passed. A floorboard creaked outside. Not downstairs, in the hall. Something had made it up. Bare, wet feet stepped slowly along the corridor. One step, pause, another step, pause. Water dripped onto wood. A voice whispered from the hallway. Not my ex-wife this time. Marianne. "Mr. Hale?" I didn't answer. "Mr. Hale, open the door." "No." "Your basement is flooding." "No." "Your insurance won't cover it if you ignore the problem." That almost made me laugh. Almost. The wet footsteps stopped outside the bathroom door. Marianne's voice said, "What color was the sold sign?" Rule 20 said if Marianne came to the house after dark, ask her what color the sold sign was. If she said anything but red, do not let her in. But I hadn't asked. It was asking me. That felt backwards. I stayed silent. The doorknob turned once. The lock held. Marianne sighed. "Red," she said. It was red. The right answer, or the right word. The knob turned again. The lock clicked. I lunged forward and grabbed it with both hands, twisting it back. Something on the other side pushed, hard. The door strained against my weight. The voice outside changed, lower, wetter. "Let the realtor in." I braced one foot against the sink cabinet and pulled the knob toward me. The door shook. For a moment, I saw the latch sliding. Then something downstairs began humming. The freezer. It had restarted. The pressure on the bathroom door stopped. The wet footsteps retreated. 1, 2, 3. Then silence. I waited until my arms ached before letting go of the knob. The house was quiet again. Not safe. Quiet. I found my phone in the hallway at 2:31. The window at the end of the hall was gone. Not dark. Gone. Where it had been, there was only wallpaper. I did not touch it. I gathered my blankets and moved to the center of the hall again, because the loon rule had told me to sleep there with the lights on. The lights, unfortunately, stayed off. I don't know if that meant I was failing the rule or if trying counted. At 2:44, something knocked from inside the locked second bedroom. Tap, tap, tap. I ignored it. Then the knocking moved to my bedroom. Tap, tap, tap. Then the bathroom. Tap, tap, tap. Then downstairs. Every lake-facing window. Tap, tap, tap. The whole house became a polite request. I covered my ears. The knocking continued. Not louder, never louder. That was worse. If it had been violent, I could have treated it as a threat. But it was patient, gentle, almost respectful. Like it knew houses eventually open. At 3:03, the old freezer in the basement stopped humming again. This time, I did not move. Rule 19 said go upstairs immediately. I was already upstairs. I stayed there. A minute later, something heavy dragged across the basement floor. Then another sound, the wooden door. The one with no handle. The one Marianne had said was old storage. The one Rule 11 said never to open. It creaked, slowly. From below came the smell of lake water, fresh, cold, deep. My phone buzzed again. Unknown. The door is not open if it has no handle. I stared at the message. Another appeared. Unknown. Go see. I turned the phone face down. Then it rang. No caller ID. I let it ring. At the 7th ring, the loons called again outside. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then silence. Not 7. I waited. Nothing. The phone stopped ringing. A voicemail appeared. I should not have played it, I know that. But I did. At first there was only static and water. Then Marianne's real voice came through. Mr. Hale, if you are hearing this during your first night, it means the house has started communicating through your phone. Do not trust text. Voicemail is safer, but only if you hear lake water before my voice. I sat up. Her voice continued. I should have told you more before I left. I didn't because too much information too early makes people test rules. You seem like the type who would test rules. Fair. If the wooden basement door opens before sunrise, do not go down. If it opens after sunrise, call me. A pause. Then quieter. If something tells you I knew about the previous owner, it is telling the truth. If something tells you he escaped, it is lying. The recording crackled. In the background, I heard a woman sobbing. Marianne's voice became strained. Do not let the lake convince you the house is the dangerous part. The house is a lock. Locks are frightening when you are trapped inside them, but they are worse when they fail. The voicemail ended. My phone screen went black. Then a new text appeared. Unknown. She sold you a lock. I turned the phone off. It turned itself back on. Unknown. Locks have keys. I removed the battery. The screen glowed anyway. Unknown. Check the freezer. I put the phone in the bathroom sink and closed the door. At 3:26, the upstairs hallway lights flickered on. Dim, yellow, but on. I almost cried with relief. The relief lasted until I noticed the floor was wet. Not soaked, not flooded, just damp, as if someone had walked through with dripping clothes. The wet trail led from the stairwell to the locked second bedroom. It passed directly beside where I had been sitting. I lifted my blanket. My socks were wet. Rule 15. If you wake up wet, do not change clothes until you check the dock. I had not been asleep. At least, I didn't think I had. But my clothes were wet. I looked down. Water darkened my jeans from the knees down. My socks squished when I moved my toes. I stood slowly. Check the dock. That meant looking toward the lake. But it was after 2:17 now. Still night, but the specific rule had passed. I moved downstairs with the flashlight in one hand and the rule sheet in the other. The basement door was still open. The salt line was intact, though damp. I did not look down the stairs. The living room curtains had closed themselves again. That did not comfort me. I stood beside the porch door and pulled the curtain aside just enough to see the dock. The rowboat was still tied there. And there was someone sitting inside it. A man. He faced the house. His head was bowed. His hands rested on his knees. The porch light above him glowed yellow. The boat rocked gently in water that otherwise did not move. I checked Rule 6 again. There should be no boat tied to the dock. If you see one, close the porch door and lock all 3 locks. Already done. But Rule 15 said check the dock, so I had checked. The man in the boat lifted his head. I stepped back before I saw his face. Too slow. For 1 second, I saw him clearly. Middle-aged, thin, dark beard, hollow cheeks, eyes wide with the exhaustion of someone who has not slept in years. I had never met him, but I knew who he was, the previous owner. He raised one hand, then pointed down, not at the lake, at the dock. Something was lying there. Fish, not 3, dozens. Pale blind fish covered the dock boards, all pointed toward the house. Rule 16. If fish are left on the porch, bury them before sunrise. Again, not the porch. The dock. The lake loved gaps. The man in the boat mouthed something. I could not hear him through the glass. He pointed again, then slowly turned his hand and pointed at himself. Fish. Him. Doc. Me. I shut the curtain. The house groaned. From the basement came a soft knock. Not on the door. from inside the wooden storage room. Tap, tap, tap. I backed away. The old freezer started humming again. Then the kitchen faucet turned on. Black water. I heard it before I saw it. I did not go to the sink. Instead, I went to the pantry and took the salt container. It was almost half empty. I poured another line at the top of the basement stairs, behind the first. The humming below became louder. Angry. The black water in the kitchen sink stopped. Then every pipe in the house knocked once. The previous owner's voice came from the basement. "She sold you the lock." I did not answer. "She sold me the lock too." Nothing. "She'll sell it again when you're gone." I backed toward the stairs. From below, he said, "Ask her what the wooden door holds." The freezer stopped. The basement went silent. Then something behind the wooden door said my name. Not my ex-wife, not my mother, not Marianne, my own voice. Daniel. I went upstairs. I stayed in the hallway until dawn. I did not sleep. I did not change my wet clothes. At 5:41, the first gray light touched the windows. At 6:03, the porch light flickered. At 6:14, the lake made its final offer. My ex-wife called from across the water. Not from the porch, not from the window, across the lake. Daniel. Rule 12. If someone calls your name from across the lake, answer only, "Wrong shore." I went to the upstairs bedroom, keeping my eyes away from the window, and stood behind the closed curtain. She called again. "Daniel, I'm sorry." I gripped the curtain. "Wrong shore." That was all I had to say. 3 syllables. But my throat closed around them, because part of me had wanted that apology for months. No, longer than months. Maybe years. The lake knew. Of course it knew. It had been listening through pipes, windows, phones, black water, and whatever pieces of myself I had carried into the house. "Daniel," she called. "I shouldn't have left like that." I closed my eyes. Wrong shore. "I know you tried." Wrong shore. "I miss you." My mouth opened. For one horrifying second, I almost said her name. Instead, I forced out, "Wrong shore." The lake went silent. Then every window on the lakeside of the house cracked at once. Not shattered, cracked. Thin white lines spiderwebbed across the glass. Something outside screamed with my ex-wife's voice. Then the sun rose. The pressure in the house lifted. The basement freezer hummed steadily. The water smell faded. Birds began calling from the pines. Real birds. Normal birds. I walked downstairs like an old man. The lake-facing curtains were closed. The porch light was still on. I switched it off after sunrise, as Rule 1 required. Then I opened the front door. Cold morning air came in. The red sold sign was still by the driveway. The lake was calm. The rowboat was gone. The dock was covered in fish, dozens of them. Pale, blind, silver white in morning light, not on the porch, but close enough. I found a shovel in the mudroom and buried them behind the woodpile before the sun climbed fully above the pines. When I finished, Marianne's car was in the driveway. I hadn't heard it arrive. She stood beside the sold sign wearing the same camel coat and leather gloves. She looked at the fish burial mound, then at my wet clothes, then at my face. "You made it," she said. I laughed once. It did not sound sane. "Did I?" She looked at the lake, only briefly. "First night, yes." I walked toward her with the shovel still in my hand. "What is behind the wooden door?" Her expression changed. Just slightly. Enough. "You heard from Mr. Vale." "The previous owner?" "Yes." Is he alive? Marianne hesitated. That depends on what you mean. I tightened my grip on the shovel. She noticed. I am not your enemy, Mr. Hale. You sold me a house that tries to drown people. No, she said. I sold you a house that keeps something in the lake from walking inland. That's not better. It is for everyone not living here. The anger that rose in me was clean and sharp. You knew. Yes, you knew what would happen. I knew some of it, and you let me buy it. Her eyes hardened. You signed every page placed in front of you. You waived extended inspection because you wanted the price. You asked about internet before you asked why a lakefront property cost less than a condo. I opened my mouth, closed it. She was right. That made me angrier. She softened slightly. I am not saying you deserve this. No one deserves this. But the house does not choose owners randomly. People come to Renwater already looking for somewhere to sink. I looked away. The lake glittered behind the house. Beautiful, hateful. What happened to Vale? Marianne walked to the edge of the driveway and looked toward the dock. He lasted 8 months, longer than most. Where is he now? Somewhere between the dock and the door. The basement door? She nodded. What's behind it? The first room. What does that mean? The first version of this house was built closer to the water. It burned down in 1911. The basement door was recovered from the ruins and built into every replacement. Why? Because it was already holding. Holding what? Marianne looked at me. The lake's first guest. The words made my skin crawl. Who? She took a folded page from her coat pocket and handed it to me. Not laminated, old, yellowed, a newspaper clipping. October 1911. Woman missing after Renwater house fire. Husband claims she walked into lake before blaze. The photograph showed a woman in a long white coat standing beside a dock. Rule 18. If you see a woman in a white coat standing on the ice, remember that Renwater does not freeze in October. I looked up. Who was she? Marianne's face was unreadable. Eleanor Wren. Renwater. Yes. The lake is named after her? The lake was renamed after her. What was it called before? Marianne looked toward the water. No one writes that down anymore. Why? Names invite attention. The cracked windows along the lakeside of the house caught the morning light. For a second, each crack looked like a wet finger drawn through fog. I folded the clipping. What do I do now? Live here. That's your advice? That is the arrangement. I'm selling. No one will buy before your first month. Why? You already know Rule 14. Do not invite guests to stay overnight during your first month. I stared at her. That includes buyers? It includes anyone the house might mistake for replacement. I hated how calmly she said it. So I'm trapped. For now. And after a month, you can try to sell. Did Vale try? Yes. What happened? Marianne looked toward the dock. He found a buyer. And? The buyer stayed one night. She didn't need to say more. The wind moved across the lake. Ripples spread outward from the end of the dock, though nothing was there. Marianne handed me a second sheet. Additional rules Mr. Vale wrote before he left. I looked at it. More rules. Of course. A second list. Vale additions for owners who survive first night. Rule 21. If your phone receives texts from the house, remove the battery and place the phone in the freezer until sunrise. Rule 22. If the previous owner appears in the rowboat, ask what he left in the desk. If he points down, do not trust him yet. Rule 23. If the fish are found anywhere between water and porch, bury them before sunrise. Rule 24. If the lake uses someone you love, do not correct its impersonation. Correction teaches it. Rule 25. If the basement freezer stops humming 3 times in one night, the wooden door will open before dawn. Rule 26. If the wooden door opens, do not look inside. Ask Eleanor what she wants. My throat went dry. Ask Eleanor? Marianne nodded. And if she answers, write it down. What if she lies? She will. Then what's the point? Marianne looked tired then, truly tired. Sometimes a lie repeated enough becomes a map of what it refuses to say. I folded the sheet. What did she want from Vale? He never told me. Did he write it down? Marianne looked toward the house. You should check the desk. The writing desk upstairs, the one facing the lake. Of course. Before she left, I asked Marianne one more question. What color was the sold sign when Vale bought the house? She paused beside her car. Red. Then she got in and drove away. I waited until her car disappeared down the road before going back inside. The house smelled normal now. Cedar, dust, stone, no lake water, no black faucet, no cold draft from the basement. The upstairs writing desk stood in front of the lake-facing window. The curtain was closed. I kept it that way. The desk drawers were empty except for one envelope taped underneath the center drawer. Inside was a letter from the previous owner. My hands shook as I unfolded it. Mr. Hale, if Marianne gave you this house, she has decided you are either desperate enough or hollow enough for Renwater to notice. I do not mean that cruelly. I was both. You survived the first night if you are reading this. Good. The house will treat that as consent. Do not mistake sunrise for victory. Sunrise only resets the rules. The lake does not want to kill you. That would be simple. It wants to be invited inland. Owners are how it knocks. Do not open the wooden basement door. Do not believe Marianne knows everything. Do not believe I escaped. If I come in the rowboat, ask me what I left in the desk. The answer is a warning, not forgiveness. At the bottom, he had written one final line. Eleanor does not want out. She wants someone else in. As I finished reading, the old freezer in the basement stopped humming. Once. The house went still. Then it started again. I stood frozen at the desk. Below me, something knocked from behind the wooden basement door. Tap, tap, tap. And a woman's voice whispered, "Wrong shore." A woman's voice whispered from behind the wooden basement door. Wrong shore. I stood frozen in the upstairs bedroom, still holding Vale's letter in one hand. The curtain in front of the lake-facing window was closed. The morning sun pressed against it from outside, turning the fabric a dull gold. It should have made the room feel safer. Daylight usually does that. It lies to you in a gentle voice and tells you the night is over. But the old freezer had just stopped humming, once, then started again. And something behind a door I was never supposed to open had repeated the phrase that kept the lake from using my name. Wrong shore. I read the last line of Vale's letter again. Eleanor does not want out. She wants someone else in. Below me, the basement door knocked. Tap, tap, tap. Not the door at the top of the stairs, the wooden one below, the door with no handle, the first room. I should have left the house right then. I could have grabbed my keys, gotten in my car, driven to the gas station 20 minutes away, and kept going until rainwater was just a bad deal and a worse memory. Maybe the house would have let me. Maybe it wouldn't. But I didn't try. Instead, I went downstairs. That is the part I still hate admitting. Not because I thought I was brave, not because I had a plan, because Vale had left a warning in the desk, and Marianne had given me more rules, and the house had survived mourning like nothing had happened. I needed to see where the line was. I needed to know how trapped I really was. That is how it gets people like me. It makes curiosity feel practical. The basement door at the top of the stairs was still open. The salt line I had poured across the threshold was damp but unbroken. A cold draft moved upward, carrying the smell of stone, rust, lake water, and something faintly sweet, like flowers left too long in a vase. The freezer hummed steadily again. I stood at the threshold and looked down. I did not step into the basement. Rule 9 said not to enter between 1 o'clock and 4 o'clock a.m., and it was morning now, but the house had taught me that technicalities cut both ways. Morning didn't mean safe. It meant the rules were waiting to be misunderstood. At the bottom of the stairs, the wooden door stood closed. No handle, only keyhole. A dark, wet stain had spread across the concrete in front of it. Not a puddle. A footprint, one bare footprint, pointed outward, toward the stairs, toward me. I backed away. The freezer stopped humming again. Second time. My breath caught. Rule 25 from Vale's Additions. If the basement freezer stops humming 3 times in one night, the wooden door will open before dawn. It was not night. It was morning. But the freezer had stopped twice now. Maybe the count didn't reset at sunrise. Maybe nothing did. The humming restarted. I grabbed the salt container from the kitchen and poured a fresh line across the basement threshold, thicker this time. Then I closed the kitchen door, packed a bag, and walked to my car. That was the smart decision. For about 6 minutes, I thought I had made it. The driveway was wet with dew. The red sold sign leaned near the road, still where Marianne had left it. The lake glittered behind the house in full daylight, ordinary and cold and beautiful. I put my bag in the passenger seat. Then I saw the fish. 3 of them lay on my windshield, pale, blind, still twitching, not the ones I had buried. These were fresh. Their mouths opened and closed against the glass. I stepped back. Rule 23 said if the fish were found anywhere between water and porch, bury them before sunrise. The car was beyond the porch, in the driveway, another gap. My keys were in my hand. I could have swept them off and driven away. Instead, I looked at the house. The upstairs curtain had opened. Just one. The writing desk window. Behind the glass stood a woman in a white coat. Eleanor Wren. She was not wet. That was what made her worse. Everything else connected to the lake had been wet, dripping, drowned, cold. Eleanor stood dry behind the glass, her white coat spotless, dark hair pinned neatly, face pale and composed. She looked less like a ghost than like someone who had been waiting upstairs all morning and was disappointed I had not come back. She lifted one hand. Not a wave. A beckoning. Then the freezer stopped humming for the 3rd time. I heard it from outside. A low mechanical hum cutting off beneath the house. The sound dropped out of the morning like a heartbeat stopping. The fish on my windshield burst. Not exploded. Collapsed. Their bodies flattened into dark water that ran down the glass in 3 black streaks. From inside the house came a sound I will never forget. The wooden basement door opening, a slow scrape, old wood over old stone. Then the house sighed, every window fogged from the inside. I ran back in. Again, stupid. Again, maybe necessary. The front door was unlocked. I had locked it, of course. The house smelled like the lake now. Not faintly, completely. Water, weeds, cold mud, rotted wood, and something deep enough to crush light. The basement door at the top of the stairs stood open. The salt line was broken, not scattered, broken in the center, as if someone had carefully swept away only enough to step through. At the bottom of the stairs, the wooden door was open. Darkness waited behind it. Not a room, a shoreline. I could hear small waves. Rule 26. If the wooden door opens, do not look inside. Ask Eleanor what she wants. I stood at the top of the basement stairs and kept my eyes on the wall, not down, not into the open door. My voice shook when I spoke. Eleanor, what do you want? The house went still. The waves below stopped. A woman answered from the basement. Company. I closed my eyes. Of course she did. Who? She laughed softly. The sound moved through pipes, floorboards, window glass, and my teeth. You know who? I thought of my ex-wife's voice calling from the lake, the apology I wanted, the sentence that nearly made me answer wrong. You can't have her, I said. Eleanor sighed. I never asked for her. The basement stairs creaked. One step, then another. Someone was climbing. I backed up from the threshold. Then who? The creaking stopped. Eleanor's voice came from halfway up the stairs. The owner. I swallowed hard. Me? A pause. Then, eventually. The word was worse than yes, because eventually had time inside it. Patience, hunger, certainty. Something touched the salt line at the threshold. It hissed. A pale hand appeared on the top stair rail. Dry, white, long-fingered. I gripped the salt container and poured the rest across the doorway. The hand withdrew. Eleanor said, almost amused, You still think the salt keeps me out? It doesn't. It reminds the house to keep me in. The floor beneath me trembled. The windows cleared one by one. The freezer started humming again. I looked toward the kitchen. The sink faucet turned on. Clear water. Then gray. Then black. Eleanor whispered, The house is tired. I backed away and grabbed Vale's letter from the dining table. The last lines repeated in my head. Eleanor does not want out. She wants someone else in. Ask Eleanor what she wants. She had answered. Company, the owner, eventually. I needed Marianne. I hated that. I hated that the woman who sold me the house was the only person who seemed to understand the shape of the trap. But my phone had no battery. The house could use it anyway. And Marianne had appeared in person once already without me hearing her arrive. So I did the only thing I could think of. I opened the front door and shouted toward the driveway. Marianne! The trees swallowed my voice. The lake behind the house remained silent. I shouted again. Marianne Voss! The porch light flickered. It was off, as it should have been after sunrise. Still, it flickered. Then my car horn sounded. Once, twice, 3 times. I stepped onto the front porch. Marianne's car was parked behind mine. I had not heard it arrive. She stood beside the sold sign in her camel coat and gloves, holding a red thermos. She looked at the black streaks on my windshield, then at me. The freezer stopped 3 times, she said. Yes. The wooden door opened. Yes. Did you look inside? No. She closed her eyes briefly. Good. I asked what she wanted. And company. Marianne opened her eyes. That's what she always says at first. At first? She gets more specific. I walked down the porch steps. Did you know the previous owner didn't escape? Yes. Where is he? She looked toward the lakeside of the house. Closer than he wants to be. What does that mean? It means if he appears in the rowboat again, don't trust him unless he answers correctly. I pulled Vale's letter from my pocket. He said the answer is a warning, not forgiveness. Marianne nodded. That is his answer. Why does the lake still have him? Because he opened the wooden door. My anger returned all at once. Then why didn't you tell me what was behind it before I bought the house? Because you would have opened it. No, I wouldn't. You opened Vale's letter. You listened to your voicemail. You checked the dock when you woke wet. You came back into the house when you should have driven away. She said it softly, not accusing, certain. You would have opened it to prove you wouldn't. I hated her for being right. Behind the house, something splashed in the lake. Not large, just enough to remind us it was listening. Marianne handed me the red thermos. What is this? Coffee. I stared at her. Really? No, salt water and iron filings. I nearly dropped it. She gave me a tired look. For the threshold. If the wooden door opens during daylight, salt alone won't hold it. Why? Daylight is not its natural time. If it opens now, something inside is being helped from outside. I looked at the lake. The lake? No, Marianne said. Vale. That hit harder than I expected. He's helping Eleanor? He thinks he's helping himself. She walked past me toward the house. I followed. Inside, the air had grown colder. The basement door was still open. Black water flowed from the kitchen sink into the drain, though the faucet was no longer running. Marianne stopped at the top of the basement stairs. Eleanor, she said. No answer. Eleanor Wren. The house creaked. A woman's voice rose from below. Marianne Voss. Marianne flinched, just slightly. Still selling locks? Eleanor asked. Still rattling them? Marianne replied. For a moment, I almost admired her. Then the basement freezer stopped humming again. Marianne's face went pale. That should not happen with me here. The lake-facing curtains opened all at once, every single one. Morning light flooded the house. So did the view of the lake. I shut my eyes. Marianne shouted, Do not look at the water. Something slammed into the porch glass. Then again, not knocking now. Impact. Wet bodies. I heard fish slapping against the windows, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. A voice called from across the lake. Not my ex-wife, not my mother. Vale. Daniel, Rule 12. If someone calls your name from across the lake, answer only, wrong shore. I kept my eyes closed and shouted, Wrong shore! Vale called again. I left you a warning. Wrong shore. I can help you sell, Marianne whispered. Again. Wrong shore! The impact stopped. The curtains slid shut by themselves, slowly, one by one. Marianne opened the thermos and poured a dark, glittering line across the basement threshold, over the broken salt. The liquid hissed against the wood. Steam rose. The basement screamed. Not Eleanor. The basement. The house itself. Marianne gripped the doorframe. Mr. Hale, listen to me carefully. You have two options. I laughed once. It came out wrong. Only two? You can leave now and never return. If you do, the house will sell itself again. Someone worse may buy it. Someone lonely. Someone curious. Someone who opens doors because they think rules are superstition. That's not my fault. No, she said, but it will still happen. And the second option? She looked down the stairs. You can become the owner. I already bought it. No, you bought the deed. That is not the same. The wooden door below slammed shut. The freezer started humming again. Marianne exhaled. The owner is not the person whose name is on paper. The owner is the person the house recognizes as the lock. I thought of the rules. For the owner, not resident, not buyer, owner. What happened to the first owner? I asked. Eleanor's husband. The one who claimed she walked into the lake? Marianne nodded. He built the first house. He locked her in the basement during an argument. The house caught fire that night. He said she escaped and walked into the lake. But she didn't. No, she died behind the wooden door. Marianne's silence answered. The house settled around us. For the first time since I moved in, I felt something like pity. Not forgiveness. Not sympathy. Pity. Eleanor had been locked in before she ever became part of the lock. Then why is she dangerous? I asked. Marianne's expression softened. Because suffering does not make people holy. Sometimes it only makes them hungry. The lake outside rippled. A boat knocked against the dock. Once, twice, 3 times. Vale had returned. Marianne looked toward the closed porch curtains. Good. He heard enough to get desperate. What does that mean? It means we can ask him. We went to the porch door. All 3 locks were still fastened. Through the curtain, I saw the shape of the rowboat tied to the dock. Marianne stood beside me. Do not open the door. Do not look at his reflection in the glass. Ask only the question. I swallowed. What did you leave in the desk? From outside, Vale answered immediately. A warning, not forgiveness. His voice sounded human, exhausted, close. Marianne nodded. Now ask what Eleanor asked him for. I did. Silence. The rowboat bumped softly against the dock. Then Vale said, My brother. Marianne's face tightened. Did you give him? No, Vale whispered. I gave her my buyer. My stomach dropped. The person who stayed one night? Yes. Marianne looked sick. You told me he left before morning. I lied. Clearly. Vale's voice shook. I thought it would free me. Did it? A long pause. No. The rowboat knocked again. Vale continued. She doesn't want company. She wants witnesses. One inside the room, one in the house, one across the water. She makes a triangle. That's how she moves the shore. Marianne went very still. What did you say? She moves the shore, Vale whispered. That's why no one can sell clean. The house isn't keeping her in anymore. It's keeping the lake from realizing where inland starts. The porch light flickered blue. Blue. Rule 13. If fog covers the water and the porch light turns blue, leave the house through the front door and sit in your car until the light turns yellow again. I looked toward the front windows. Fog pressed against them, thick, white, impossible in full morning. Marianne grabbed my arm. Front door, now. What about Vale? He made his choice, Vale shouted from the dock. No, wait, I told you. Marianne dragged me toward the front door. The house groaned. The floor tilted slightly toward the lake. Not enough to fall. Enough to feel. The basement freezer stopped humming again. The wooden door below opened. Eleanor screamed, Marianne! Marianne shoved the front door open. Fog poured in from outside. The driveway had changed. My car was still there. Marianne's car, too. But the road beyond them was gone. In its place was shoreline, gray water lapping where the dirt road should have been. The red sold sign stood half submerged at the edge. Marianne whispered. She moved it. The fog behind us thickened. From inside the house, Eleanor laughed. not softly now, triumphant. We ran to my car. The fish slime still streaked the windshield. I got in. Marianne got in the passenger seat. I started the engine. It turned over. Thank God. I reversed down the driveway, but the tires hit water where gravel should have been. The car lurched. The fog swallowed the house. Then the porch light turned blue, bright blue. The entire lake-facing side of the house glowed through the fog like an underwater lantern. "Do not drive into water," Marianne said. "I know that." "Do you?" I stopped the car. The headlights showed the road ended 10 feet ahead in Black Lake water. Behind us, the house door opened. A woman in a white coat stepped onto the porch. Eleanor. Not behind glass now, outside, dry. She walked down the porch steps. With every step, water spread under her feet, turning grass into shoreline. Marianne whispered, "She has veil." The rowboat appeared behind Eleanor, sliding through grass as if it were water. Vale sat inside. His head was bowed. Behind him sat another figure, a man I didn't recognize, the buyer, the replacement he had given Eleanor. 3 points, room, house, water, a triangle. The shore moved. Eleanor smiled at my car, not at Marianne, at me. "You asked what I wanted," she said. Her voice passed through the windshield like cold air. "I want the door opened from the other side." Marianne's face drained of color. "What does that mean? The basement door?" I asked. Marianne shook her head. "No, the lakeside." I thought of every lake-facing curtain, every porch lock, every knock, every voice asking to be let in. The house was one side of the door. The lake was the other. Eleanor had been trapped between both. And now she wanted an owner to open the way inland from inside the lock. "Drive," Marianne said. "There's water. Not forward." I understood. I slammed the car into reverse and drove backward. The rear tires spun, caught gravel, and shot us toward the house. Marianne braced against the dashboard. "What are you doing?" "Becoming the owner. That is not a plan. No, it's a bad decision with momentum." The car sped backward through the fog. Eleanor turned her head. For the first time, she looked uncertain. I hit the brakes by the front porch, threw the car into park, and ran for the house. Marianne shouted behind me, but I didn't stop. I entered through the front door. The house smelled like smoke now. Old smoke. 1911. Smoke. The stairs, walls, and ceiling flickered between cedar and charred beams. For half a second, I saw the first house burning around me. Heard a woman screaming below. Heard a man locking a door. Heard flames eating oxygen. Then it snapped back. The basement door stood open. The wooden door below stood open too. Behind it was not storage, not a room, a lake at night. I stood at the top of the stairs. "Eleanor!" I shouted. The house shook. She appeared at the bottom of the stairs, white coat dry, hair neat, face pale. "You came back?" "Yes." "To open the door?" "No." Her expression hardened. "Then why?" I held up the deed folder Marianne had left on the entry table. I had grabbed it without even realizing. "My name is on the deed," Eleanor smiled. "Paper. I survived the first night. Luck. I asked what you wanted, and you didn't listen." "I did." I stepped down one stair, the basement cold wrapped around me. "You don't want company." Her face twitched. "You don't want out." Another step. "You want someone else to understand what it feels like to be locked in." The basement walls groaned. Behind Eleanor, the lake beyond the wooden door rose. "You want a witness," I said. Her smile disappeared. I remembered Marianne's words. Sometimes a lie repeated enough becomes a map of what it refuses to say. Eleanor had said company. Vale had said witness. The house was a lock. The lake wanted inland. But Eleanor? Eleanor wanted the story to stay open forever, so no one could leave it. "You want the wrong person punished," I said. Eleanor screamed. The sound shattered the basement light. I stumbled, but stayed upright. "My husband is dead," she hissed. "Yes, his house burned. Yes, his name is gone. Yes, then someone must answer." The water behind her surged. I took another step down. "Then make me owner." She went still. "No," Marianne shouted from the doorway above. I didn't look back. I kept my eyes on Eleanor. "Make me owner," I said again. "Not witness, not guest, not replacement. Owner." Eleanor stared. The lake behind her calmed. "Owners lock doors," she whispered. "Yes, owners leave people inside. Some do. Will you?" I thought of the fish, the dock, the rowboat, Vale, the unknown buyer, the way Marianne had sold the house because that was the arrangement, the way every owner had survived by passing the lock to someone else. "No," I said. The word came out stronger than I felt. "I'll keep the door closed, but I won't feed it people." Eleanor laughed bitterly. "You think you are better?" "No." That made her pause. "I think I know exactly how easy it is to become worse." For a moment, the basement looked different. Charred wood, smoke. A young woman in a white coat pounding on a locked door while fire roared above. Then the vision changed. Vale standing at the porch, begging a stranger to stay. Marianne handing over rule sheets. Me signing documents because the house was cheap. All of us part of the same door. Eleanor stepped aside. Behind her, beyond the wooden doorway, floated a key. Iron, black, old. It hung above the lake water. "If you take it," she said, "you stay." Marianne whispered from above, "Daniel, don't." I took the key. The lake screamed. Not Eleanor. The lake. The water beyond the wooden door rose like a wall and slammed toward me. I shoved the black key into the wooden door's keyhole. It fit. Of course it did. I turned it. The wooden door slammed shut. The entire house dropped. Not physically, spiritually, like something heavy had settled back into place. Every lake-facing window shattered outward. Wind tore through the house. The porch light burst. The rowboat outside cracked in half with a sound like a gunshot. Vale screamed. Then silence. When I opened my eyes, I was lying at the top of the basement stairs. Marianne knelt beside me. The basement door was closed. The salt line was gone. The wooden door below was not visible from where I lay, but I could hear the freezer humming, steady, normal. The house smelled like cedar again, not smoke, not lake, cedar. "Did it work?" I asked. Marianne looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. "Yes." I sat up slowly. Outside, daylight filled the front windows. The fog was gone. The road was back. My car sat in the driveway. The red sold sign had fallen over. The lake behind the house was rough now, stirred by wind. Real wind. "What happened to Vale?" Marianne helped me stand. We went to the porch. The rowboat was gone. On the dock lay a folded piece of paper weighed down by a pale fish. I buried the fish first. I had learned that much. Then I read the note. It said, "A warning, not forgiveness." Nothing else. Marianne left after noon. Before she did, she took the sold sign and put it in her trunk. "You won't need that," she said. "I'm not selling, not yet. I thought you'd be happy. I am never happy when someone becomes an owner." I looked back at the house. It looked different now, not kinder, never that, but less like it was waiting for someone else. "What happens to you?" I asked. Marianne put on her gloves. "I stopped selling this house." "Just like that?" She gave me a tired smile. "Not just like that, 43 years like that." I remembered Rule 20. "If you come here after dark, ask me the sign color anyway." "What color?" She opened her car door. "There is no sign." Then she drove away. That was 6 months ago. I still live at Renwater. The internet works most days. The road gets muddy after rain. The roof needs repairs. The heating costs are horrible. The nearest grocery store is too far away, and the lake is beautiful in a way I no longer trust. The rules are still on the kitchen wall. I have changed some, added others. Rule 1 remains the same. Porch light before sunset. Off after sunrise. Rule 2 remains the same. Close the curtains before full dark. Rule 3 remains the same. Never answer knocking from the lakeside. I changed Rule 11. The wooden door in the basement must remain locked. The black key stays with the owner. If it warms in your pocket, leave the house through the front door and wait until it cools. I changed Rule 22. If Marianne comes after dark, ask what color the sold sign was. If she says red, she is remembering an old rule. If she says there is no sign, let her speak through the door only. I added Rule 27. If Eleanor asks for company, ask whether she means witness. I added Rule 28. If Vale appears in the rowboat, thank him for the warning. Do not forgive him, I added Rule 29. If the lake offers you the voice you miss most, do not correct its mistakes. Do not argue with its version. Just say, "Wrong shore," and walk away. That one has saved me more than once. Sometimes my ex-wife still calls from across the water. Sometimes my mother asks if I've eaten. Sometimes the previous owner sits in the rowboat at dawn, head bowed, waiting for a forgiveness I will not give him because he told me not to. And sometimes, in October, when the nights get cold enough to frost the grass, but not cold enough to freeze water, I see Eleanor standing on the lake. Not ice, water. Her white coat moves in wind I cannot feel. She looks toward the house. Not angry anymore, not peaceful either, just waiting. I don't know if I saved anyone. I don't know if becoming the owner was brave or just another kind of surrender. All I know is the house has not gone back on the market. No one else has spent a first night here. No guests stay overnight. No buyers walk through pretending not to notice the curtains. And every sunset, I turn on the porch light before the lake can ask. Tonight, the freezer stopped humming for the first time in months. Just once. Then it started again. I went to the basement door with salt in one hand and the black key in the other. From behind the wooden door, Eleanor whispered, "Owner," I said, "wrong shore." She laughed softly. Then she answered, "Not anymore. The black key is warm now. The porch light has turned blue." And somewhere across the water, someone is knocking from a house that was never built. Tap, tap, tap.